Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Voice from the Underground, the podcast where politics and pop culture collide. It is I, Jasen Dutch, and I'm here today for a bit of a special episode with a couple of our friends from over at the GK Podcast Network. So I will introduce them in just a second. This was supposed to be a podcast with a repeat guest that we've had on before, Pastor Isaac Lindsay. He actually was on the stream a minute, but he's been having some internet issues. So it's looking like maybe he'll be able to join us in a bit. Maybe he won't. But we got time constraints here, so had to go ahead and get started without Pastor Lindsay. But we do thank him for at least attempting to get onto the stream. But as we all know, with live streams, sometimes your technology just does not cooperate with us. So I will introduce our guest. First of all, back today without the spike. It looks like he maybe had some water run across his hair to the left or something like that. Jeff Dornick, what's happening, man?
Hey, man, thanks for having me back. I blame the hair on Gavin Newsom since he shut down, any kind of place you can legally get a haircut for quite too long. So it's all him.
So you're in LA, right?
Orange County. Okay.
So yeah, so like Bakersfield is open. I went and got the mop chop right before I came out. So I'm looking quite handsome, actually.
There you
go. But your hair is definitely a leftist today because it is.
Apparently, I feel like, so apparently I've got the hair of a leftist. I'm doing a 60-hour fast. I eat paleo. I feel like at a certain point, you're going to convert me, just not ideologically or politically. So
the funny thing is I had sent you a message. What was it? 3 weeks ago or so, last time we talked. And there was that Southern Baptist preacher who was like ripping on you online. And he's, I know some of your listeners don't like swearing, but I'm going to swear anyway. He said he looks like a little fucking faggot. And I'm like, oh, this is a conservative pastor talking. And he's ripping on you. Like to say that he doesn't like because you look so gay. I'm like, these are the people who, how do these people have a platform? I don't even know. I mean, if he's calling you that, imagine what he calls someone who actually is LGBT. It's got to be atrocious.
Well, the funny thing about that video specifically was, his main critique of me was that I was willing to have a conversation with Milo Yiannopoulos, who is gay. And his punchline was that, of course, I would have Milo on because I look gay. Apparently those fundamental Baptists really need to work on their insults. So,
well, I have other reasons why I would want to talk to Milo, but none of them have to do with the fact that he likes guys.
Hey, I will just say, I will talk to anybody. And I think coming on the show is proof enough.
Yeah. Who would want to talk to this guy? But also one of your cohorts in crime there, JD Rucker, first time down in the underground. Welcome to the show, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. We're glad to have you with the green screened American flag behind you. It looks very nice and patriotic.
That's a real flag. I just it's a green screen. I lied. I lie right off the bat.
Prove it's a real flag or a real flag. Reach around.
There you go with the racial. There you go with the LGBTQ slurs right off the bat.
It's not a fag. It's a flag. We don't let the F word around here. Okay, but what I was trying to say,
at least JD and I don't. I don't know about you over there, Jason, but JD and I do not go down that route.
No. It's funny that I was going to tell you, by the way, to turn around and hug it like Trump, but now you have to hug the wall. The very, very high wall. But the funny thing is like, and this is probably an interesting way to start things out, is that we have, like, when it comes to like gay terms, even the word gay, like I'll admit, like for years, probably up until somewhat recently, I was very, very well known for using gay as a synonym for dumb, right? Just because I've been doing it my entire life. I didn't realize that it was something that offended people. But then people told me, they said, hey, you know what? Maybe not a particularly fantastic idea. I mean, the word gay had been used in my church a lot when I was a kid, from a condemnation standpoint in the evangelical church. So, sometimes you have to learn that those particular things aren't exactly something that you should be spewing out of your mouth. The Bible speaks that pretty profoundly, I would say. Do not speak in offensive terms, those sorts of things. So, I handily admit that that I've done that type of stuff in the past. I think the difference becomes is that when someone tells you, like I was having a really interesting conversation the other day with a couple of folks about race with a police officer, and this police officer was Palestinian, I believe, or Pakistani or Palestinian, I forget. One of them started with a P. Forgive me for forgetting, but he was telling me how he some of the perceptions of his friends in law enforcement, and I was like, well, if you say something and it's wrong, and someone tells you about it, that is where you have a problem with, because hate is not a necessary ingredient for bigotry, I don't believe. I think that the unwillingness to change is a necessary ingredient for bigotry. So curious as to what your guys' thoughts are on that, coming from the right side of the political aisle.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, I get what you're saying about not changing and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, where does that end? Because I feel like we're getting to a point now where everybody's offended over everything, and I think there's a perfect example of like on Instagram, there's a whole lot of like influencers that are talking about how diet restrictions, eating paleo, eating keto, whatever it might be, that is by definition white supremacy, because it's rooted in colonialism. And if you are talking about eating healthier, that is actually racist against minorities. And this is their words, because they can't afford to eat organic and healthy and all this kind of stuff. So at a certain point, if eating healthy is now white supremacist, I don't know at what point are we going to draw the line and say, okay, guys, enough's enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit to you, I'll confess to you that a lot of times folks on the left will use the term go a little bit far with stuff. But the problem I think that we have in the society is we didn't go very far at all for a long time. So now you have some people who are maybe going a little bit further than is comfortable for some people, right? So it's always about truth is either objective or subjective, right? And a lot of times things are you have to put them into perspective. So if you have been used to some degree of comfort or ability to do or say something in your particular existence, and then you find out that it's not actually something that should be normalized, then it takes some time for you to make that change. And a lot of times when people say, well, you're not moving fast enough for me relative to what they want, then that's where I think things can come to a head sometimes. I think a willingness to say, okay, I'm willing to listen to your side and I'm willing to realize this or work on that. As long as there's a sharing of ideas is what's generally fruitful.
Yeah, but why does it only seem to go one direction? At least from my perspective, because I feel like nobody is looking to change to fit with my ideologies. It only seems to be let's push society further to the left. Let's push society to be more accepting of all these different crazy things and crazy ideas, and if you're not coming along, then you're racist or you're bigoted and all that kind of stuff. I'm not seeing the push to the right in the same way that I'm seeing the push to the left when it comes to a lot of these arguments. And that's where I feel like, is it that only the right is willing to move to the left and the left's not willing to move to the right? Do you feel like, what's your take on that, Jason?
Actually, I will answer that, but JD, you haven't said much. So if you want to just piggyback on that or say anything before I respond.
No, I agree.
Okay, so so Here's my answer. Society's been moving left from the right since forever, because let's face it, all the way on the right end of the political spectrum, you have, and it's probably unfair to use the term political spectrum, but from a sociological angle, all the way on the right is things like women aren't allowed to have rights. All the way on the right is where you have theocracy. All the way on the right is where you have racial segregation. All the way on the right is where you have a lot of ideas that are just not necessarily acceptable in society. And let's face facts. In the 16, 17, 1800s, Christianity started going through a bit of an awakening. Islam is going through the same awakening right now, which is why you have a lot of people who are becoming radicalized, because they see it's basically Islam is a medieval religion waking up to a modern world and not reacting well to it, right? In a lot of cases. That's not a general statement about Muslims, but it's a statement about some sects of Islam. Christianity has had the advantage of becoming more, quote, liberal for a couple of centuries now. And it's been fought every single step of the way with people saying, why is it changing? Why is it changing? Why is it changing? Let's push it back. But how far back do you want to go? Do you want to go all the way back to where wives weren't allowed out of their homes and had to cover and were getting arrested for wearing a one-piece bathing suit, at the beach? How far exactly back to the right are you interested in going?
I'll answer that one.
Go ahead, JD.
As far as it makes sense, you mentioned a lot of things that don't make sense, and I wouldn't agree with any of those. I would also disagree with segregation.
Well, I said things that don't make sense in what context are you saying that don't make sense?
It doesn't make sense to arrest a woman for wearing a one-piece bathing suit. I have never heard of anyone on the right or left calling for anything like that.
But it's happened in the history of the United States. The first ever woman to.
That's all historical. So
yes, because we were further to the right back then. Okay. So we've moved gradually leftward, where those types of things are now unbelievable to us.
You mentioned the segregation aspect of it, though,
right?
You still think that segregation is pushed by the right, and nobody on the left is pushing segregation today?
Well, first of all, I am the first one to talk about things like Southern strategy and the fact that Jim Crow was a Democratic law. I'm not here to absolve the Democratic Party. Okay, let's be clear. The Democratic Party did a lot of those racist things, especially with the Dixiecrats and the Southern Democrats, before they decided to switch over to the Republicans.
I just mean about today. I'm not talking about,
but that's not liberalism. Let's not pretend that the Democratic Party is synonymous with liberalism throughout history, because that is just not truth.
Totally agree.
So, as far as the Democrats and them having a lot of responsibility for the racial injustice that took place in the past, it was all them, right? Like, a Republican Party was completely the ones that were, pushing for the abolition and freedom and stuff like that. But they didn't really start doing it until their wives started. Basically, what triggered the civil rights movement for the most part was Northern white women finally seeing on television what was happening in the South and pushing their husbands to do something about it, right? And then at the same time, by the way, they also were able to use a lot of those metrics to get more rights for women in the first place, because no one has benefited more from affirmative action than white women. So it's benefited white women significantly more than it has African Americans. That's pretty much, I think, a common knowledge. But as far as what we're talking about with this Overton window that encompasses, where society is, I don't really want. There might be an issue or two here or there where I could say, I'm comfortable with a move to the right on that particular issue. When it comes to human rights, though, I'm not, because a move back in that direction is a move back towards a time that I think that we've graduated from, and it's time to move away from.
So which things do you think specifically, like, we don't want to make this, and I don't think we should make it, a Republican versus Democrat thing. But right now, even the face of conservatism would be President Trump, even though a lot of us don't agree that he is a true conservative, that he's more of a populist conservative, but that's a different debate.
Right.
But let's just use the generic term conservative associated with President Trump. Which of his ideas, which of his policies do you disagree with as far as we shouldn't move in that direction, pull to the right for this issue or that issue?
Well, number one I think is on immigration.
Nationalism. Basically.
The nationalist idea. And it's like, look, I think I've said this to Jeff before. I am not going to sit here and tell you that I believe a wall is evil. I supported if you guys remember, I think it was 2000, was it 11 or 12 when a border wall came up under the Obama administration, and I was perfectly in favor of it. Right? I look at the idea of like, hey, I have a fence around my house. If I were going to put a fence on the southern border, that's fine, as long as we're not denying people who are trying to declare asylum, that sort of thing. The problem with the Trump immigration policy is that it's based in culture fear, right? The Muslims are coming in the caravan. They're sending rapists. They're sending killers. They're not sending their best. I assume some are good people, but they're not sending their best. They're sending coyotes. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing MS-13. Why don't we get more people from Norway? Okay, that is a culture war. That is set up for fear. When Fox News parades angel moms on television and talks about how my son or daughter was killed by an illegal immigrant, that is done specifically to incite fear of people who are from those countries. When statistics show clearly that immigrants commit crimes at a far lower rate than citizens do. That is not to absolve immigrants from the crimes that they commit, but at the same time, they're doing it based on fear. So I might not be against a wall in general, but I am against the Trump wall because of the idea that makes it so popular with those who support it. There's a reason why the Air Force veteran who had lost both of his legs, when he started that "We the People Will Build the Wall,"
Brian Kolfage.
I'm not sure what his name was, but he started that campaign. The reason why they raised so much money overnight. There's a reason why people are defending Kyle Rittenhouse, and trying to raise a defense fund for him, because of the fact that they feel that he's protecting them from something that's scary and different and possibly brown. So, this all goes back to culture war. The right wing has always, even when I was a member of your team, they have always been about fear in one way or the other, whether it's staples in Halloween candy to backmasking to, whatever the case may be. There's always been this element of fear. We have to fear the dark. We have to fear the night, so that we can stay good and stay protected. And while that's not all entirely bad to have responsibility and not be haphazard, at the same time, it's not being afraid of things that are different is ignorant to me.
Well, I'll just say this, I've talked to a lot of conservatives on my show and had a lot of, prominent people that you would know all their names and all this kind of stuff. We've talked a lot about illegal immigration. I honestly, I haven't spoken to a single conservative, and I'm sure there may be one out there, and there may be some out there. I haven't talked to many, if at all, conservatives that are concerned about the losing the culture and illegal immigration being rooted in racism. Like for me, what I'm looking at when I'm looking at illegal immigration is I'm looking at what's going to be the most compassionate thing for the people that are trying to migrate here to the United States, because I grew up in Arizona, where we dealt with a lot of illegal immigration. A lot of friends that were children of illegal immigrants. Some of them actually snuck across the border themselves. It's extremely dangerous. You are essentially being controlled by the cartels. You are giving them lots of money. The cartels are extremely violent. Oftentimes women are raped. Oftentimes there's sex trafficking. Oftentimes there are drugs. Oftentimes there are lots of murders. People are dying across the way. To me, the most compassionate thing that you can do for those illegal immigrants is to shut down illegal immigration once and for all, and then fix the immigration system to have a better legal system to enter. But you can't do that until you fix the illegal immigration problem itself. Take away the power and control from the violent gangs and cartels and all of that. The other side of it is when you're looking at the people that, when you have an illegal immigrant kill an American citizen, like I know up in San Francisco, that was happening. That was close to where I have family members and friends that actually live. So that was very close to home. The reason why we make such a big deal about that is not because of the color of the skin of the illegal immigrant. The reason why we were making that such a big deal is because of the policies in place in San Francisco with catch and release. They arrest them, they let them go. Their sanction policy specifically, it has absolutely nothing to do with the color of their skin.
JD, I'll let you piggyback, unless you're going to say I agree again.
It's tough because, all of our arguments have been diffused. As you said, we can't build the wall out of fear for MS-13. We can't build the wall and base it on the notion that there are possibly terrorists who are piggybacking off of these caravans. If we have those, as you put it, cultural arguments for building the wall, then we shouldn't build the wall based upon those arguments. Therefore, we're against Trump's wall, not necessarily against a wall, just Trump's wall. And I have no counter to that, because if something must be ideologically pure, or at least ideologically acceptable for it to be effective, regardless of whether or not it's objectively effective or not, there's no argument to oppose that. You've already won. There's no way to counter that.
Okay, well, folks, we've had a good show. So I guess it's got a comment here. So let's take a look real quick. Got a comment from Flip It, says Project Fear. I think he was echoing my point from before. Maximus, thank you for your comment here. Since they crossed the border, is it illegal for us to give them a hysterectomy? So I'm not sure that we want to quite go that way, but I think that perhaps the frustration that you're showing with what I'm saying here is a lot of the
I'm
same.
Not frustrated.
What emotion would it be then?
No, I think what he's doing is he's showing that the way that you set up the question was that essentially you are acting as if having any sort of fear or supporting Donald Trump's wall is in and of itself a cultural argument. So thus, because it's a cultural argument, it's a disagreement because it's over, brown skin or essentially rooted in racism. So thus we can't have the wall, but you're projecting that onto us as our positions, when in reality, that has absolutely nothing to do with it.
It may not have anything to do with, like I told you before, I might not be against a Jeff Dornick / JD Rucker wall. I'm against the idea behind a wall that has people in packed stadiums cheering on the idea that we're going to build a wall, we're going to make Mexico pay for it, and we're going to bring in immigrants from Norway. Because you can't help that. That's not a dog. That is clearly a dog whistle. It's one of those situations where, he's obviously saying that our American culture, I mean, you've heard this over and over. You heard it from Nixon. You heard it from the Bush administration, the Bush one, where, your neighborhoods are going to change, et cetera, et cetera. And people fear those neighborhood changes. We saw that people get, specifically white people, get uncomfortable when their neighborhood starts to change demographically. Part of that's understandable because, what I always give an example when I used to go to the lunchroom at college. You'd have the black kids sit in one place and the white people sitting in another place and the Asian students sit in another place, et cetera, et cetera. And I always thought to myself, why don't we all just sit in the same place? So I understand that part of that is normal. I was talking to this police officer the other day who's Middle Eastern, and he was telling me that he's looking for a new house. And he's looking for a new house where he's not the only Middle Eastern person on the block, because when he was a kid, he was bullied because of the fact that he was Middle Eastern. So some of this I understand is like natural, that people do have a fear of other people. It's the unwillingness to expose yourself to other cultures and assume that people have to assimilate to the way that we expect them to be in this country, rather than allowing them to bring the bits and pieces of their culture and their religion and their faith and their personality with them. How people complain because They say, oh, I don't want to have to press 1 for English, or why is this guy flying a Mexican flag outside of his house? Yet I've never seen anyone complain about an Irish flag. And in fact, you try to take down a Confederate flag, which isn't this country, and the president goes apeshit over it. So, pretending that flag's not deeply embedded in cultural biases. So when you continue to hear these same narratives over and over and over again, and then people say, I can't believe the left thinks that Trump is a racist, it seems a little bit odd to me that you would draw that conclusion based on the body of evidence that we have, especially from a guy who used to mark black people's applications with a C, and we know this happened.
Yeah, well, I think that part of the problem, though, is that like you were citing Bush, you were citing Nixon, so we're looking at 30 to 50 years ago, and then projecting that onto today. When we all know, Trump doesn't like the Bushes at all. So I think it's kind of hard to take
that's because of
ideology,
QAnon, no. And that's because of Jeb Bush, right?
Well,
didn't like Jeb Bush.
No, Trump's been criticizing the Bushes for a long time, even before the primaries, even before he jumped into the election. So that's not even a legitimate critique of Trump. He's been opposed to the Bushes and the establishment, and both on the Democrat and the Republican side. That's why Republicans hate him so much too. And so I think we can't take old ideologies that were in place 30 to 50 years ago and then place that onto Trump and act like Trump is acting just like Bush Sr. That to me is not an argument that holds up to scrutiny. Now, the thing is that if you're gonna talk about the Confederate flags, you got to talk about the context of what we're referring to, and not every single thing is a dog whistle for racism. And I think that we have to be careful projecting that, because we have to look at what people are actually saying, not what we think their motivation inside their heart of hearts is saying. And we have to be careful with that. And as conservatives, we have to be careful doing that with the left. When I'm critiquing Joe Biden, when I'm critiquing Kamala Harris, when I'm critiquing Barack Obama, I'm looking at what they're actually saying. I'm looking at what they're actually doing. I'm not putting secretive motivations onto what they're doing to make it seem worse than it actually is. I'm looking at what are they actually doing. When you look at President Trump, I don't think that you can actually say with what he's actually doing that he's a racist, especially with the fact that that the trend is that minority communities are heading more and more towards Trump in the polls, in the approval ratings. When I went down I was on Sunday, I was at the MAGA rally that was welcoming Trump down to Orange County. It was a very diverse crowd. There was lots of Latinos, lots of African Americans. There was a lot of LGBTQ people. There's a lot of people that traditionally were always to the left. The thing is that Trump is doing what is actually best for the minorities. If he was a racist, he wouldn't be. And there's a reason why the Latino community is trending towards President Trump. And a lot of that is because they understand the problem of illegal immigration. He's doing something about it. And the thing is that you may not like his secretive motives that only the left can seem to see through and see. But the fact remains that what Trump is actually doing for the Black community, for the Latino community, for the LGBTQ community, for every single community in the United States is a net positive. And I think that's a difference that we have to dive into.
So we'll dive into that real quick. There was a comment. I don't know if you guys can read that. Maximus says, are you guys telling me that you don't know about the forced hysterectomies on the border detainees?
Yeah, I've never had one.
Yeah, same here. But no. So Jason, are you familiar with that story?
I've heard it, though. I will admit that it's not something that I've focused a lot of attention on, because I believe, and thinking back on this is probably March. So pre-COVID, it seems like a world away sometimes. And I don't always believe every single thing that I read as true fact. So that may very well have happened, but I haven't particularly seen any evidence of it. So I'm not going to blast on it, because I don't blast on things unless I know that they're actually legit. So I'm not saying that it's not true, but I have to plead somewhat ignorant here, because while I'm familiar with the fact that this was an issue, I did not do the research to determine whether or not it was legitimate enough in that particular instance. So unfortunately, I can't speak to things I don't know about.
Yeah. Now, JD, correct me if I'm wrong on this story, but with this story specifically, there was an accusation that this is what the doctors were doing. When I was reading the story and when I was reading the account of the supposed forced hysterectomies, the accusations were, the way that the media was portraying it was that the ICE agents, they're taking illegal immigrants, they're taking these women, they're putting them under the knife. They don't know what they're doing. They're going in for these forced hysterectomies, waking up, and they were shocked to find out that this had happened, right? When in reality, this, as far as I could tell, there was an accusation that this was happening. I did not see any verification at all, except for one woman that made the accusation. The specific examples that they cited, I did not see actually any proof that anything was actually forced in the way that this was being portrayed. One of the examples was that there was medical malpractice, and they had actually gone in and taken out the wrong body part. So then they had to go back in and fix it. That is medical malpractice. The doctor should be sued for doing that. But last I checked, that's not a forced hysterectomy. So I think we have to be careful with our terminologies and our definitions of what's actually happening, and not automatically leap to the worst possible conclusion unless we actually have evidence and proof to back it up. So I'm just throwing that out there as an explanation.
Well, I have to agree with that, because not that I'm agreeing specific. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have.
Yeah, none of us know. And the thing is,
I don't have the facts.
I would condemn the thing if it's true. I condemn it. I'll be the first one to say, okay, that doctor needs to be fired. If he's doing forced hysterectomies, go to prison. Should be sued, and the guy's scum. But I need evidence to be able to say that.
Okay, so let's move to a couple of issues here. You mentioned, just curiously speaking, you mentioned the a lot of the policies that are helping minorities from Trump. So, what's can you identify for me what specific policy Trump has enacted that led to help minorities specifically?
Sure. You want me to take that one, Jeff?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, let me turn the question back to you. Do you agree with or disagree with his what was it, first steps, the bill that he signed, the criminal are you referring to the prison reform bill, or are you referring to the historically black college? No, the prison reform. I think it was called First Steps, or
I think it was first. I think it was the First Step. Was it First Step Act?
Yeah, I think right, but the prison reform. So that was actually Jared Kushner that was leading that, if I recall correctly, along with Van Jones. Those were the two guys who were sort of collaborating on that. Nothing has happened with that at all. It's been stagnant. There's been absolutely no action that's been taken on it whatsoever, other than, I believe, an executive order that has led to zero.
Okay.
What has it led to tangibly? One person released?
It's led to more than one, but you do agree with it, at least in principle, whether it's
in
one
principle.
or
There's a lot of things that I agree with in principle that Trump has put through. I agree with him on Pakistan. Right? Wait,
but hold on. But back on this one. Yeah. So you agree with it in principle. So
sure.
If we can show that it has led to more than one release, let's say tens of thousands of releases that wouldn't have happened otherwise, would you
tens of thousands of releases of people of minorities
directly as a result of First Act? Would you agree that would be a positive thing?
I would agree that would be a positive thing.
Cool.
Okay. Now, as I said, when I have not seen any evidence of any mass releases.
Okay.
It's been more. I mean, if you want to pull up a site and put it in here, we can pull it up and share the screen.
Oh no.
Okay.
But this is one of those things. This is so one thing that you'll find I never do. It's not, let's not bust out. I could pull out an article from Daniel Horowitz over Conservative Review saying this is such a bad idea. Trump is terrible. Look at these 37,000 people that have been released as a result, including illegal immigrants who have, yada, yada, yada. I could,
real quick, Val Drew, I
send that over to you after the show.
Okay. Val Drew just asked a question. She's asking about what about the historically black colleges and universities? I'm not sure. Are you asking about, are you saying that as what about Trump's move on that, or or are you asking me what I was mentioning when I brought up the historically black colleges and universities? I'm not quite sure what she's asking, but let's try to address that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think
she said yes, but I don't know what she said. I don't know which one you said yes to. Well,
so I'll ask you the question. President Trump has the administration, not President Trump directly. I don't want to get into details as far as which individual within the administration prompted the expansion, but there has been a marked historic expansion on the amount of money that has been given to historically black colleges and universities in the United States, higher than the last 3 presidents combined. That is something now, to me, I think that's a good thing. I think that it's a pandering thing. I don't want to get into the motivation behind it. It was something that was specifically intended to secure endorsements from, so.
I agree with you 100%. He did something.
You think that it was a good thing?
Yeah, he did something good, but the motivation was disingenuous. I mean, Obama tried to do similar things in his presidency with HBCUs, and was specifically shot down by very much by the media, but also by the Republican-led Congress at the time, that he was putting too much money into those particular and ignoring other schools. And the narrative in the media was that he was doing something way too, quote, pro-black. Now, Obama was very weak when it came to things like that, because after that, he got very gun shy, and he was very much afraid to do a lot of things that would be considered pro-black, because he wanted to portray himself as the everyman. That was a huge flaw in Obama. I'm not an Obama, acolyte here, but there were a lot of things that Obama had aimed to do for the black community that either got stalwarted by Congress, or that they basically passed legislation on, but went back and forth with the Paul Ryan Congress at the time, and then took a lot of those measures out. So as far as the HBCUs goes, I'm totally fine with that. I think that it's a good thing. I think what would be more important to do would be to make sure that we have equal access to education at the K through 12 level, so that we don't have to worry about kids going to a black school that have nowhere near the same access to an education that kids going to a predominantly white school in a rich neighborhood does. That is how you're going to affect change. And frankly, neither is doing that.
So school choice from the Republicans?
No, not school choice. No.
Okay.
I'm talking about my view on school is going to be something that if I do decide to run for office, is probably going to make me lose the election, but I don't care, because I'll lose on a winning idea. My view on the only way, and I truly believe this, I believe the only way for us to get to an equal society is for us to start with K through 12. I'll give you an example of what I mean. In Illinois, I'm sure you have examples out where you're at too. In Illinois, and I've said this before, in Illinois, we have Naperville North High School. They graduate astronauts. They graduate senators. They graduate doctors. They have a $65 million football field. 6 miles away is East Aurora. East Aurora graduates students at 71%. Their football team uses the same uniforms as they did in the 90s, and they play in a dirt patch.
But
they don't have. I'm sorry. Well, I don't know that, but they don't graduate as many pro athletes as Naperville North does. That's for sure. But everything from the top to the bottom is better. Computer labs, internet access, after school programs. The amount of money that the teachers make per capita per person is higher. The union contracts, the health benefits that come with everything like that. So what I would propose when it comes to school, and I would love to do this on a federal level, but I believe that the Supreme Court would probably throw it out. So I think you have to mandate it federally and then have it enforced on a state level, is to have, because schools are obviously funded by property taxes, right? By and large. Some money comes from the lottery, but mostly it's property taxes. So if you have a rich neighborhood paying $17,000 per house in property taxes, they're going to have more money go to their schools than a poor neighborhood with $600 per house in property taxes. You take every single dollar that was made via property tax in that city, put it into a kitty statewide. Every dollar of property tax goes to this same kitty. You divide it evenly between every single school. So every single school, Naperville North and East Aurora, from now on, get precisely the exact same amount of money. Within a generation, you will have equality, because now you won't need programs like affirmative action that make people get so angry. Because right now we have a lot of issues with affirmative action, wherein you'll have African-American students predominantly, but oftentimes affirmative action affects Asians adversely. Instead of having a 4.0 student at East Aurora get to go to MIT, even though he wasn't prepared for MIT, that's not to say that he wouldn't have been able to have been prepared for it, but he wasn't prepared for it because the academia that he went through didn't give him the preparatory courses that he needed. He could end up failing at MIT, and then people look at it and say, oh, look, he's just falling into the stereotype, just another dumb black guy, right? So you have every single school get the same amount of money.
Wait, let me just ask a clarifying question, okay? Every school gets the same amount of money, or every school gets the same money per student?
Every school gets, well, you could do it either way, to be honest with you. But I mean, I think that you have to look at a way that it'll work best. That's why I think it should be left up to the states, because in some states, you're going to have schools that are overcrowded. Maybe they'll have to take some of those funds and divide it between, a couple of schools and build a new school and then have a different division.
So why not? So why not take money, attach it to each student, and give parents control over where their student goes to school? And if a school sucks, like a lot of them do, not all, but like a lot of them do, parents can take their kid and that money and go somewhere else. And if the school wants to be able to keep those students there, they clean up their act.
Because we don't know how those, first of all, I can see that where you're going with that. The problem is going to be is in how is it affected. So if a parent sends their children to a particular school and that particular school sucks, not every single parent has the ability to send their kid to a school that's 13 miles away, depending on their work schedule, depending on, what it is they do for a living. Maybe they're a single parent home. Maybe the husband is sick. Who knows maybe they have 3 different kids and, they're all in different levels of the school system. One's in K through 12, one's in junior high, one's in high school. So how do you quantify that that's going to be fair for each child? It's not about what's fair for the parents. It's about what's fair for the kids.
Right. It's about what's fair for the kids. And again, everybody's going to have extenuating circumstances. But what you're arguing for is forcing kids to stay in a school situation without any opportunity for them to get out of that bad educational system, because that school is guaranteed that money. They don't have to do anything to earn it. All they got to do is they just have to be open and they get that money. Why not create an incentive system where these schools have to earn their income? To me, that is the beauty of school choice. That is incentivizing the schools to become better. And if the schools are not better, then the parents can take those kids and they have the choice. If they can figure out how to make it happen, if they can figure out a carpool, if they can talk to a friend who maybe goes to that school, if they can figure out a way to make that happen, they can make a way for their child to get a better education, as opposed to forcing kids to stay in bad school systems. And again, I've got a lot of friends in Arizona that they were forced to be in certain bad school education systems. They could have driven 5 miles down the road in high school, and the kids had their own cars that they could drive to. They could have driven 5 miles down, but the school district didn't allow them to do it. If they had school choice, the parents could have made that decision that's best for their kids, as opposed to being forced to go to this inner city school that was bad and actually did not help them.
So I think that there are pieces of that you can stick into what I'm talking about, but that's not while it possibly is well intended, I don't believe it will be effective, because we've tried things like that before in some states. what we're looking to do, what we need to do is effectively drive permanent change. And permanent change will not happen in an area when people run from that area. Okay.
So you're wanting permanent change in the sense of the outcome that you want that permanent change in the sense of you are controlling the system, you are controlling essentially where the kids go to school, and if you can evenly distribute the funds across all the schools in a state or all the schools in a country, even that's going to create equality.
Right.
I don't see how logically that makes sense. I mean, logically, you're going to have some schools are going to need more funds than other schools. If you're in an inner city where there is a lot of crime, you're going to need more funds for security. You're going to need more funds for protection. Maybe some schools, maybe you're going to need a lower student to teacher ratio depending on the needs of the students. That school may need more funds. A lot of schools, not every school is evenly distributed with students. There's some schools even in the same district. Some might have 5,000 students, some might have 3, some might have 3,500. I don't see evenly redistributing the money as being an effective way of creating equality. I see competition and the ability to incentivize a better education system as the better way to go, instead of incentivizing the status quo. I see as everybody gets money.
Unfortunately, the last little bit of your comment snapped off on me there, but can you repeat that last line?
The problem that I see with your ideology there is that the system would be incentivizing the status quo. There's no incentives for a better education system.
So, you keep talking about incentive. I understand. I'm trying to understand where you're going, but the problem that I see with this is that it's just a dance around to let people not actually affect change. Again, I'm not saying that you don't want to affect change. I'm saying that you can't give people the loosey-goosey, able to take a laissez-faire attitude towards this and not actually implement the program. A school that is right now, you say, okay, let me just make sure I have my thought clear. A school that needs more money than the other. Let's say that we'll talk about East Aurora again. Okay, so let's say East Aurora would need more funds than another school will have, like Naperville North, right? But right now, Naperville North is getting more funds than they need to have a safe and productive school environment, and it's able to invest those funds into extra activities for those kids, like getting brand new uniforms every single year, et cetera, which are not needed for life. Okay, you can certainly be fine with using the same uniform for 2 or 3 seasons. Our softball team does it, So, but the school that is the more depressed school is by default going to get more funds than they were previously getting, because instead of getting per student, XYZ based on say a $650 property tax there, they're now getting the average or the mean of what the property taxes would be for the homes in the state. So that dollar amount is going to be effectively translated into a higher amount than what they were getting before in almost every single scenario. Now, I'm not saying that there can never be an exception and there can never be something where, hey, a state can address and say, hey, we have a certain amount for emergency funds that we have to do for something, or they have a certain amount in funds for building new schools as population increases. Of course, we need to look at writing those things into law. But when you give people the means to make their own, to invest the funds the way that they want to, then you're going to have people who are going to be corrupt, and then people who are going to mismanage the funds. And the only people who are going to lose here are those children. So it needs to be overseen at a state level.
So giving parents the control over their children's education system is going to hurt children.
No, I'm talking about giving school legislators.
Well, I'm not making that argument.
Let's be frank. Every parent doesn't care as much about their kids as we might like to think that they do. Okay, and it's not a kid's fault if their parent's an asshole, right?
Yeah.
So it's not Donald Trump's fault that he was born to Fred Trump. It's not my fault that I was born to Bill and Suzanne. It's not anybody's fault. If you're born to drug addicts, that's not the kid's fault. You think that if you're born to a drug addict, your parents are going to just take that money and use it towards your education? Of course they're not. They're going to use it on freaking drugs. That's not the kid's fault.
Number one, nobody's making the argument that you're going to give money to the parents for them to freely spend however they want, and it should be quote unquote on their children's funds. So let's back to like what we're talking about, school choice, where the money is attached to a student. State will then pay the school based on the attendance of that student going to that specific school, right? So the problem that I see with your argument here is that it will create a temporary solution. It will not create a permanent solution. So yes, there will be some schools that are getting less money now that would get more money tomorrow if this was enacted, right? But long term, we're going to have the same problem. Yes, everybody will have the same money, but the education system is not going to be increased because everybody's getting the exact same money. They'll just redistribute the kids to where all the schools have the same amount of students. Nothing changes. The thing that I want is I want to incentivize schools to have a better education system. There's a lot of problems with our system right now, and I would make the argument that a lot of times it's actually systemically racist against minority students, and a lot of it is because of the teachers' unions. A lot of it is because of these kinds of redistribution of wealth kind of strategies that are being implemented. And this is actually hurting those minority kids that need to get out of that system. A lot of those parents in the inner cities, I've spoken with them. I know them. I grew up with them. They would have done anything to get their kids out of those stupid high schools and stupid junior highs that were doing nothing to actually help them get better, because they knew if they could drive 5 miles down the road to the better school, they would do that. They would wake up 20 minutes earlier in the morning to be able to get their kids up and get them over there. I grew up with these kids. Let me tell you something. They would have done almost anything to get their kids a better education. Instead, the system was forcing them to go to these inner city schools, and they would not let them out unless they literally picked up and moved to another school system. To me, that is the corrupt system, not a system that allows parents to make the choice that is best for their children. I think that the other problem that we're seeing is this idea that parents should not have parental rights over their children, which I think to a certain degree is where we're heading with the kind of ideology that you're pushing right here, where yes, there are some parents that are stupidly bad parents. They're druggies, they're alcoholics, they're awful people, right? But at the same time, do we punish the good parents because there's some bad parents? I think, again, we have to get back to liberty. We have to get back to personal responsibility. We do what we can with Child Protective Services to protect children that are in abusive situations. But that doesn't mean that we punish the parents that are trying to be good parents, do what's best for their children, and actually get them out of these inner city schools that are doing nothing to further their children's education.
Well, let's move. I want to respond to that, but I want to let Tony's comment be heard first. Let's hear from the guy in the middle.
Tony, I assure you don't want to hear my perspective on education. It is a little bit more, I would say, aggressive than Jeff's. I think that everything that Jeff said is I agree with. Okay, I do believe in school choice. I do believe in incentives, and we're not talking about the type of incentives that I think really concerns people on the left. It's like, oh, so people have to earn the right to an education. That's not what we're saying. Or schools have to earn the right to be funded. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that if you were to, number one, and this is where we get into the whole radical concepts that, far right guy in the middle. I don't know why I'm on the middle. I should be in the right. But
dude, are you calling me a moderate?
You are a moderate. Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. There we go.
There we go.
Perfect. Yeah, Jeff is the guy in the middle. Jason and I are the extremists. I would I would get rid of.
If Jeff's in the middle, then we have a big fucking problem.
Well, we could have had the other moderate from the left, but you had to tell him, hey, you're going to be going up against JD Rucker and Jeff Dornick, and all of a sudden he had technical issues. Yeah, right. Anyway,
well, he actually said was who?
I know. I've never heard of it here. I'll pass. You can take them on your own, is what he told you.
That's what everyone says when I tell them the name of my podcast. They're like, what's the name of your podcast? Voice from the Underground. Huh? What's that? I never heard of it before. By the way, subscribe on YouTube. Help us out. There you go. But
there we go.
True capitalism at work.
True capitalism. Yes. So, I would get rid of the Department of Education altogether. I think that if we were to,
Betsy DeVos has gone with it, right?
Oh, please. Yeah, all day.
Get rid of the whole federalized education system.
Yeah. Redistribute. You can break it down. Will take approximately 6 years. You could take it and redistribute a lot of those jobs into the local level. Many of them would be eliminated, and that's fine. Just give them enough time to make sure they do land on their feet. You don't want to hurt people. I know that's something that a lot of people on the right and left don't want to do, and so I agree with that. And once that's eliminated, we need to get back to a more community-based situation. I want to throw this at you, Jason, as a concept. What if there was no, direct government involvement other than oversight? Other than, what if the funding came not from federal government, not from state government, not necessarily even from property taxes? Keep the lottery money. That's fine, even though I think the lottery should be gone anyway. But let's say, the vast majority of the money is based around, number one, save people tax dollars. Number two, allow the districts and the individual schools to raise the money that they need through the community. With, let's say, a caveat, a minimum, a safety net. Let's say the federal government, state governments, they say, okay, so no matter what, we know that this school, we'll call it, what's it, East Aurora? Is that the right one?
That's when I was referring.
Okay, so let's say East Aurora has a yearly budget of $30 million. We believe that if we empower them to be able to raise funds, not just within their community, not just based upon taxes, not based upon a kitty or a pool of taxes that are forced upon the people to be redistributed from at the state level or even national level or even at the local level. I mean, not necessarily local, but county level. What if it was a matter of, hey, you know what? The community itself can reach out. The community itself can come together, and you can raise funds any way you want. And in a world in which GoFundMe can raise, as you noted before, $20 million for a border wall, in a handful of weeks, certainly a school would be able to raise money as well, not just, again, based upon the local community, but also based upon, national outreach. You have a safety net for the schools that aren't able to achieve their financial goals for a certain period of time. Let's say, again, if they have a yearly budget of 30 million, they're going to, whatever they don't make up, they're not going to go drop below the 30 million. We'll figure out a way to compensate them. But what if the school is able to innovate, reach out to not just their community, but communities across the nation? What if all schools were doing this over periods of time? What if those schools, instead of being capped at whatever the government is able to dole out, whatever they're able to collect, through property taxes, through lottery taxes, what if that school is able to accumulate, $100 million for the year, and they're able to wisely spend that on improving themselves? And meantime, you still open up for even further freedoms, as Jeff was saying. What your idea says, look, we're going to get this fixed within a generation. That's an entire generation of kids who are stuck not with the choice of being able to go to a good school because there is the presence of bad parents who won't take their kids to those good schools. So the parents that are good, who are stuck, they're just stuck because they're not in the right generation. I believe that if we took the freedoms that we used to have, you'd asked earlier in the very beginning, what do we revert back to? In a lot of ways, we revert back to the freedoms. The freedoms that we used to have in a lot of areas, including education, that have been taken away, we weren't ready for them back in the 20s, 40s, even into the 60s. We are ready for them today. I do believe this. In the pre-coronavirus world, I think that we could have had a situation in which you can raise money for schools. You can allow for school choice. You can remove the Department of Education, and you can allow local communities to decide what's best. if a town in Nebraska wants to have they want to spend their money and buy a tractor, because there's a lot of people that are wanting to sign up for farming class, and they think that they can get tractor repair people or farmers or whatever. Okay, that's not that you can't say that tractor should be bought for every school if it's bought for that one school. You go to Manhattan, if a school buys a tractor, that's dumb. So the question was, what about the guy in the middle? Now that I'm on the right, I'm sure that they will never ask you to call on me ever again.
Okay, so first of all, I will reply to that, but I want to just mention a couple of the comments here, if I could. Thank you for everybody. I just realized that I only put this on Periscope so now it's everywhere. So hopefully we'll get some YouTube comments as well. But the Val, I want to ask you a question. So Val, what I want to challenge you to do is type out in one tweet. Obviously that's hard to do, but like which of these viewpoints that you think would make more sense? Because you said you're an educator and you want us to listen to your opinion. I think all three of us are open to listening to that. So send us type a message out and let me know. Excuse me, and I'll read it. The problem with community funding is, again, the communities with more money are going to end up getting more money. And that's the problem. When you have systemic inequality, in other words, you have rich communities and poor communities. A lot of times they go to the same shopping mall. The rich community is going to outfund and outraise the poor community 99% of the time. And I probably should say 100. So that is not going to affect systemic change. That is only going to keep the status quo going the way that it is right now. And it's going, instead of basically you're taking it out of the hands of the school boards, which might not be a bad idea. I'm with you on that. Okay. But the idea that a poor community is going to be able to raise the same amount of funds that a rich community is asinine. And
except it's done every single day. You just go to GoFundMe and see how many rich people are able to raise tons of money and compare that to the number.
GoFundMe is done off of what gets viral and what is sympathetic. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so great, because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but my son has autism. His autism ABA, the girl who came and taught him how to read and stuff like that and was helping him, her name was Demi. She was 9 months pregnant. Her and her baby both died because she had a stroke. Okay. I personally, this was back when I had 11,000 followers too, before Dana Loesch cut me off. I personally retweeted her GoFundMe. The goal was $4,000. She made like 900. Okay. Give me a more sympathetic story than that one. It's all about the eyes that hit it and the people that retweet it, and you get one famous person involved. On the other end, we had a guy on our podcast 2 years ago who was trying to start a later, I forget the name of it. It was in education. The guy wanted to start like a after school program, I think it was, because a lot of people, they changed the school hours, get off at 3, and a lot of parents didn't get off till 5. So they didn't want the kids in the streets. And he was like, hey, we really need this program. And he tweeted at Colin Kaepernick, actually. Colin Kaepernick didn't see the tweet, I'm guessing, and didn't reply to it. But two other NFL players who followed Colin Kaepernick did, and one of them paid for it. Actually, two of them paid for it. It was a backup quarterback on the Jets and a defensive lineman on the Giants. I forget these guys' names off the top of my head. But they actually saw the tweet, contacted the guy, paid for the class. He came on our podcast and told all about the whole story. This was like 2.5 years ago. So it's all about who sees it, right? And like, is the school more important than my son's teacher and her unborn child? Of course not, right? Like, one might affect more people, but all lives matter, right? So isn't that what you guys like to say? So, but if everyone matters, then we have to make sure that we give equal opportunity to equal access to opportunity. We cannot allow some people that the rich kids that are going to have millionaire parents donating millions each to a bunch of people who are only able to donate $5 or $10 or $15. Now, that might work in politics with Bernie Sanders, but it's not going to work on a small level where we're talking about, with like a community of 15,000 people. I think your intentions are fine. I just think that your metrics are ill.
I gotta
put in the wrong place.
Here's the thing. It's, we started the conversation with a long time ago, I think before we were even on air.
Tony does agree. He says he doesn't want to hear from you.
So you mentioned in the beginning that we need to be open. I shouldn't mention the GoFundMe because I knew that would, if I said the word GoFundMe and didn't have the time to go into what I meant, that it could be attacked. And that's kind of what happened. I do know with certainty, especially if we have, again, the safety nets that I alluded to. I know with certainty I do have faith in people. And this is really what it comes down to. The left, generally speaking, and this is not an insult. I'm trying to be as objective as possible. When I say that the left believes that things must be mandated, fairness must be mandated, otherwise our human nature kicks in and things become unfair. And the right, I wouldn't say generally, but I would say that a majority of people on the right believe that, if people are, especially Americans, are called to meet a challenge. And let's say that challenge is, hey, we're going to completely defund national education. We're going to put it on the states and the local communities. And the only way that the schools are going to be able to survive at the level they are is if communities are able to step up. And it's not just stepping up for your community, Mr. Kaepernick. Okay, it's also stepping up for all the communities. I am certain, and when I say certain, I can say this with 100% certainty, that if this plan were initiated, that every single school and every single district in the United States would receive more money next year than they received this year from the government. 100% certain. Just as I'm 100% certain that if you were to defund Planned Parenthood, that they would have more funding instantaneously than they ever received from government. The people would step up in outrage, in fear, and Planned Parenthood would have its greatest year ever. The best thing they could ever hope for is if the federal government were to defund them. Because if they did completely defund Planned Parenthood, the fundraising aspect of Planned Parenthood would go up 30-fold. We're not talking double, triple. They would end up raising $1 billion in 2021 if they were defunded right now. The challenge that we're faced with in this debate, in this entire discussion, I know that you've got to go soon, so I'll wrap it up.
I don't even know what time it is anymore. What
you got another podcast in 25 minutes.
With Tony, actually. So
there we go.
After this, I'll be with Talking Sports with Tony and Jock Talk over at Jock and Nerd Podcast. So
anytime people are given an opportunity to step up in lieu of government, you take government out of the way, the people step up and fill the gap. Does it happen 100% of the time? Actually, yes, it does. The reason that I mentioned GoFundMe was because I was saying specifically about how you say that, I'm not saying that we're using the GoFundMe model. I don't want anybody putting words in my mouth. I'm telling you this, that you said that if you did what I'm saying, which is to put it in the hands of communities, that the rich communities would have trillions of dollars and the poor communities the schools would shut down, or basically, because, or they just wouldn't get enough funding. I say the opposite. I say that the poor communities are the ones that somebody like a Colin Kaepernick, who just got $20 million from Nike in a single bonus, he's not going to let this school over here not get the funding. If he's got a heart, he's not going to be, oh my gosh, those evil people over in Naperville. No, he's just going to say, hey, you know what? Here, you guys are short $400,000. Here you go. Here's $600,000. You got a head start on next year's budget. There's zero chance that schools would fall through the cracks because this is education. People do care. It's a shame that the physical therapist, I believe it was, or not, whoever it was.
She was autism therapists, behavioral therapists.
It's a shame that had to happen. That sucks. I mean, that really, truly, that ticks me off, because you're right. In that particular case, and for that one individual, based upon this one individual campaign, that was something that fell through the cracks terribly. But when you're talking about institutions such as school districts, such as schools themselves, they just won't fall through the cracks. Not in 2020, 2021, not in this era. Okay, we have communication. We have the ability to act as communities versus acting as, okay, let government figure it all out. You guys just listen, you pay your taxes and shut up, and we're going to distribute everything. We'll tell you where the money goes. We'll tell you how it's spent. We'll tell you what's going to be on the education of your children. If you have a problem with it, then homeschool. I don't like that. And that's exactly what the left is pushing for when they say no school choice, all government funding, all distributed, socialism. It's not the same thing. It doesn't work like this. I'll be right back. I'll let you reply, but I have got to get something real quick.
I do got to get off here in about 5 minutes anyway. So first of all, I appreciate the fact that you guys stayed on. Well, I have to be on Tony's podcast, but more importantly, I promised my wife that I would FaceTime my boys at 7:15. And believe you me, you do not want the wrath of my Trump supporting wife. Okay.
No, I do not. Hey, you know what? Here's the thing,
spicy Jason. Latina Trump supporting wife that I have to deal with all the time.
Jason, I've been on real quick. I've been on. This is now the fourth quote unquote debate podcast that I've been on with a leftist.
Why do people keep calling me that?
Okay, with a progressive. Is that fair?
I would call myself a guy in the middle who. We just happen to be talking about some of the issues right now where I am on the left. There are issues where I'm a 2A guy.
Hey, there we go.
You know what I mean? But because when I look at people who are actually thinking for themselves, and I'm not ripping on anybody when I say this, I am more than happy to take something from the Republican side and fall on that, go drive with that issue. And then go with something like universal health care, or single payer, I should say, because sometimes people think you're describing different things there. I am not for the public doctor. I don't want a doctor to be employed by the government, but I do believe we should have one insurance company. And we can argue that another day. But the thing is that I pick things from here and there. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. Say again.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, I do enjoy talking to your moderate, 2A loving, radical leftist when it comes to medicine self. And so we should have these discussions more often, perhaps when you can get a progressive who's willing to come on air with us.
Well, there's one right there. Ari, what is being described has no safety net if it doesn't pan out. You can't put a plan in place without a safety net when it comes to the education of the youth in this country. It's a setup for failure that could be set us back hundreds of years. And then another person says we're fighting over the crumbs. First of all, I appreciate everybody jumping in on this. We're going to have to roll out of here. There's so much more to say, and I'm going to set up another conversation with these two guys, maybe for next week or something. We have the and I'm going to be talking with neither of you, right? Just a couple of your cronies. I'm talking to a couple of your bullies on Friday. What's going on Friday? Tell us what's going on Friday.
Okay, so on Friday, Jason is actually going to be on the Gatekeepers Network, which is the Christian network that I run. So that'll be fun. It's on a show called Fight Night, and it's hosted by my good friend Shu, and it's in. So Jason's going to be
Elizabeth
debating.
Shu?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It'll be Jason versus Bobby Lopez, who was on your show, you guys' show a couple weeks ago, right?
I like Bobby, and he's somebody who's got awesome. Good ideas on education.
Yeah, so the two of them will actually be on there debating over a lot of the issues surrounding the presidential election and a lot of current events and stuff like that. And I got to tell you, Shu is probably my favorite moderator when it comes to a debate show. I participated in his very first episode of Fight Night. And he showed up with a tuxedo shirt, and so he goes all out.
Okay, and Jeff, where can the people find you?
Where can't you find me? I think is the better question. So I've got the Gatekeepers, which if anybody's into any Christian stuff, you guys can go over there to gatekeepersonline.com. If you're into the more political stuff, like what we were talking about tonight, you can go over to freedomfirst.com, which we co-founded this guy right here, JD Rucker. And I've got a bunch of shows on Twitter, Jeff the GK. Yeah. Oh, by the way, too, if you guys are interested, got a book coming out called Church and State: How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America. JD's also one of the contributing authors over there. We got guys like Dr. Michael Brown, Pastor Greg Locke, myself, Pastor Kerry Gordon, Pastor Ken Peters. The list goes on and on. A bunch of great conservative Christian voices. Yeah, by the way, Jason, I'm going to be getting you a copy of that book because you need to read that.
Yeah, that's a fiery topic with me when it comes to Christianity, and that's what we were supposed to be talking about tonight. We're still gonna do that. Unfortunately, just Isaac wasn't able to join. He got scared of JD Rucker. And JD, you are at JD Rucker on Twitter. Is that correct?
No, I don't want anybody looking for me. Not your audience needs to stay away from me. They're radicals. No, I'm just kidding. I love your audience, and I actually love talking to moderates, as you call them.
I don't know what the audience is. I only know about myself. So
the radicals, they're all coming after me. Neo-Marxists, cultural Marxism, postmodernism.
Jesus was more socialist than he was capitalist.
Oh my gosh, are we going to go down that path right at the end?
We don't have time to go down it.
JD Rucker at JD Rucker, or as Jeff said before he was breaking up there, freedomfirstnetwork.com is the best way to find us.
Okay, so thank you guys for coming on real quick. If this is your first time listening to Voice from the Underground, please do look us up on YouTube and subscribe. Our channel's a little bit new. I'd say we've had it for 6 weeks now. This is about our 7th show. So we did get over the 100 subscribers. So thank you to everybody for that. I think we're at like 130. Get us up to 200. So subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. You can do that by going to youtube.com/voice from the underground podcast, the whole thing. Or you can just Google Voice from the Underground YouTube on, in any search engine, but just make sure you put voice from, not voice anything else. It's from me to you, from the underground to your ears. Also, if you would like to support our show, you can do so. You can go to www.patreon.com/VFU podcast. If you want to take care of if you want to support the show, when we get to the next milestone, we will donate 1/3 of our Patreon every month to Wounded Warrior, or to Autism Speaks, or to Doctors Without Borders, one of those 3 great charities, once we get over our next threshold, which we're about $30 a month away from right now. So if you want to join that, you can definitely do that. And we'll give 1 out of every 3 months to charity. You can also find us on any podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever. Just look for Voice from the Underground, or you can like our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/VFU podcast. That is also our Twitter VFU_podcast on Twitter, or you can follow me on Twitter at Jasen Dutch, JASENDUTCH. Thanks, guys. I'll see you guys in 2. Will I see you? Well, you're not going to be on, right, Jeff?
I'm not going to be on. She will be moderating.
He's running away. See, now You're running away from me.
I'm terrified. Terrified. Could not handle a fight night.
Yeah, comb your hair.
He said he was going to be on. He was going to be on, but then after tonight's shellacking, he's like, "Oh my gosh, there's no way I could go on again."
Never.
Awesome, and thank you, Val. We really appreciate everybody who watched for the first time tonight. Not a big fan of religious and into politics, but it's all good. Well, can't please everybody every time. And then Tony, you can see me in about 20 minutes talking some freaking sports. Nice to be able to do that, something other than politics, because my brain is about to turn to Mr. Cheese. But we'll talk real soon. Thank you again, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us. Tons of blast.